All right, and we are live. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me for our August listening club here at Dragonfly Arts. Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and do my standard spiel that I do at the start of all of these because I need the practice at saying all of these things because even though it's been like, what, 3 years, 2 years, I don't know, I still seem to get confused on it, so... All right, so this is our monthly listening club, but we actually have two monthly clubs. We have our listening club where we listen to a music album and discuss it. We also have a monthly movie club. Our movie club discussion was last night, so if you want to go ahead and listen to that, it should still be up on YouTube. And if you have points that you'd like to add into our discussion, feel free to comment on them. I try to keep up with the comments after the fact. I know that we have some people that watch them later on. That's the same for the listening club. So if you have opinions, let us know and we'll try to get back to you. I started these clubs because I like talking about media. So please talk to me about media. We also have a quarterly book club. Right now, this is the end of our first month of reading Love in the Time of Cholera. We will be discussing it at the end of October. So if you want to read that with us, you absolutely can. Let me know if you'd like to join. You have a little bit of time to read it, a couple of months here. You can reach out to me on our Facebook group, which I have put in on the screen. We don't just have these monthly clubs on there. We have a lot of things going on, but if you want to see what our selections are, I announce them on the first of every month. So I will be announcing them next Monday. It's also how I communicate when the times are. We don't have set times. I base it on whoever wants to participate in it. So let me know if you'd like to join us. I try to keep them to a small group just for manageable things. So let me know if you'd like to join us and I will try to fit you into the discussion. If not, you can always join us and comment on it live. We don't just have these clubs in that group. It is a group of creatives talking about the problems with being creatives as well as their wins and their goals. We have a weekly call where we talk about this. We have meetups occasionally so you can meet creatives in the LA area. So you can find us on Facebook. Please join us. Everything that we offer there is free. But if you'd like to support us, we would appreciate it. And you can do that over on our Patreon for as little as $2 a month. And I think that is everything I have to say about this. But I do have a lot to say about Aphex Twin. So kind of an interesting album to listen to. This is his debut album, Selected Ambient Works 85 to 92. I'm not going to have as much research ability because I only have one screen up right now. So I'm trying to keep you guys up on one of our screens and then researching stuff as we discuss on the others. So I apologize for being a little delayed in that. But had you guys listened to this album before?
Not me. I heard of him, but I'd never listened.
Have you listened to any of his albums? Or heard any music from him? Do you know about Aphex Twin?
No.
Sorry. I know about him, haven't intentionally listened to anything.
I am not surprised to hear that Tim has listened to Aphex Twin, specifically this album, because this is right up your alley. Did you like it?
I did. I liked it a lot. It's really cool. And yeah, I liked it.
I love Aphex Twin. I am a huge fan. It is a huge inspiration for me in like my own like electronic music. I used to work in synthesizers and that kind of thing. He made a lot of the synths that he a lot of the sounds like he made himself using like modular gear. that he built, which was very common in this time frame. That being said, I like this album a lot. This is actually my least favorite Aphex Twin album.
Why?
um, I like this album a lot, but I like him being weird. I love him being weird, and he gets so weird even on his like Ambient Works Volume 2. It's so much stranger. So this album, it was 1985 to 1992. He was 14 in 1985. So this is very early work for him. It's very inspired by like Philip Glass and like a lot of like the minimalist kind of classical music, as well as I assume Brian Eno. It's not directly listed as any of his inspirations, but like it has to be. And a lot of bringing like this kind of knowledge of techno music to the forefront that wasn't really in the electronic music world at the time. So this was kind of a pivotal album for the time, and it's very impressive that he made this when he was like 14 to like 20.
Wow.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this.
And I think after this, he got very experimental and like started pushing the limits of it a little bit. And I greatly enjoy the places that he went more. This feels like a weird question to ask for this, but did you have a favorite song for the album?
I really liked the first. I didn't make it through the whole album, but I really liked the first track with the loop of the woman's voice.
Yeah.
I like that little humanity in there.
Yeah, I do have a favorite song. I like We Are the Music Makers.
All right. This album kind of disappears for me a little bit. Like it doesn't disappear, but I kind of just zone out. So I don't actually know what any of the songs are. I just kind of exist in a state while listening to it, which I feel like is what's supposed to happen for ambient music.
I like the first and last songs a lot too.
But I like vocal sampling. So I agree with Miguel. I think I like the first song the most.
This is the first club meeting where I had to do notes so that I would know what tracks, when you ask a question like this, I would know what tracks we're talking about, because like you, it for me, it just, it almost, not like a typical Brian Eno album. This is in a different way, but it does kind of, I lose sense of different tracks, and it just feels like, this ongoing sound thing.
Which is absolutely, I think, the point. I mean, these songs are so long, well, or extremely short.
And repetitive.
Yeah, like I said, they're very, he states that he was very inspired by Philip Glass. In fact, on one of his later albums, Philip Glass does a version of one of his songs. Philip Glass being a minimalist composer who is very much built into like repetitiveness, and then suddenly changing the repetitiveness is really where his like climaxes lie. So very much a similar thing of like vibe over anything else. And it's very easy to get lost in.
I hadn't thought about Philip Glass being an influence, but once you mention it, rhythmically I can see where that comes from. But honestly, the artist that I heard the most, not consistently, but on certain tracks, and specifically the tracks that I like the most, they sound more akin to John Hassel's work, his fourth world music genre, which now I got to go to my list. Or however you pronounce that, Aegisopoulos. Those two tracks really worked for me well, because I love that John Hassel kind of thing. It doesn't sound exactly like John Hassel, but it seems, those tracks seem more akin to what I call ambient music than what a lot of the other tracks are, which seem more like simply electronica or EDM, depending on the regularity of the rhythm.
Interestingly, and this is weirdly enough one of my favorite genres of music, is intelligence dance music, or IDM.
I've never heard that term before. Is that really a thing, or did you make that up?
I did not make that up. That is a thing. I never think about it except when I like something. It tends to fall into the IDM. Like, it's always listed under it. So that's apparently where my interests lie.
Are you familiar with John Hassel's work at all?
I am not. I will have to look into it because, yeah, I'm a huge fan of this work. I am always astounded when I remember that he was 14
Mm-hmm.
and he like redefined a genre at 14.
I mean, how was my electronic music knowledge pretty much starts with Tangerine Dream. So I don't really, and Kraftwerk, obviously. So how is what he does here different than what those pioneers of electronic music were doing?
Techno.
That doesn't, you know, I know the word, but that doesn't really mean anything to me in terms of what is, when you say techno, what do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so techno has like a lot of, it's a very specific genre that has a very specific rhythm base to it. Like the 4 on the floor beat is very popular. I mean, it's dance in club, especially in Europe. He's British, so this is probably a lot of where he lives. He introduced a lot of this kind of techno beats and rhythms and like sounds that he uses on it into a lot more. I think it bridged a genre a little bit. I think 1, because he was young, 2, because I think he was playing in like pubs at the time. Could you imagine going to a pub and then just hearing this? He really introduced it to a different group of people that weren't listening to Tangerine Dream. He was introducing it to a group of people who were a lot younger and who didn't know a lot about it, but still bridged the gap a little bit. It wasn't so set in stone, and I mean, at his heart, he's a experimental artist. I always think about, he has a song on one of his later albums where it's just him repeatedly drawing his face on a spectrogram. And then he made it a song. So if you play the song and look at a spectrogram, it's just his face over and over and over again. Like, he's a weird dude. He won a Grammy, and instead of showing up for the Grammy, just played like a random set of sounds. Or just watch the music video for Window Liquor, which I think is his most popular album ever. It's weird. It is experimental. It is a thing. He is an artist at his core, and he does not care what you think about him.
As all good artists should.
What did he like? What tools did he use?
So this is actually interesting. He used an old computer and just a sampler that isn't defined when I looked at it. He made his own synthesizers, which at this time, if you were a part of like the modular like magazines, they would actually send you how to build synthesizers. So I don't know if that's what he did, but that's probably along the lines of what he did. There's a lot of people from the 80s when he would have started this into the early 90s that were just kind of building modular gear out of like cardboard using the basis of like modular magazines. So he was modifying his own synthesizers at the time. It doesn't explicitly state what he was using, but he was literally just making stuff up.
Hey, Rebecca, on his Wikipedia page, it talks about the ZX Spectrum home computer.
Yes, I read that. I don't know what it is other than 8-bit.
Oh, wow. It looks like a keyboard. That's crazy.
One of the songs on this album, I forget which one, but it reminded me of music that I was making on like MIDI Studio in high school.
Yeah, MIDI is essentially 8-bit.
Yeah, I
So
had a lot of
it's
fun.
yeah. He had a lot of songs that he was writing, and so he picked these based on what his friends liked the most.
I just find it interesting that he chose the word ambient because it's not, most of this stuff doesn't fit into, not saying rightly or wrongly, but I tend to go towards Brian Eno's definition of ambient, and most of this is not that. And when I made my list to figure out what was what, I had to. You mentioned 4-on-the-floor rhythm, and a lot of times he's one of the things that makes his stuff with the drum machine so interesting is that he's often not doing 4-on-the-floor. And so I separated that out. If I heard 4-on-the-floor, then I said, okay, that's EDM. If I heard something different going on in the drum machine, I said, okay, that's electronica.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think they had to invent a new genre for this and called it ambient techno.
Okay.
Because yeah, what is it?
Yeah,
What,
I would
Miguel?
consider it more techno than. Yeah, I think the stuff that I am more familiar with being ambient is a lot more like ethereal, usually.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Usually,
I would argue that Portishead is more ambient than Aphex Twin. Or at
yes,
least
absolutely.
this version of Aphex Twin.
This is ambient only in vibe, in the sense that I feel like I'm transported, versus like true ambient that always feels like I'm flying through space.
Maybe it's only ambient compared to his later work.
It is much more ambient, including his ambient work volume 2 is much less ambient than this.
Uh-huh.
So it's a relative thing, maybe.
And I think the ambient works is because, like, how else do you define this kind of music? This kind of like repetitive, almost put you in a trance, like it's hypnotizing.
Right.
You're watching a spiral spin as you're listening to this music.
Yeah, I wanted to build on, well, maybe I thought Tim was alluding to this, and I could be mistaken. But one of the things I really liked about the, for lack of the better term, sort of percussion, repetitive rhythm tracks, is that there's some of them that are pretty imperfect in a way that Tom York sort of popularized in the more laptopy Radiohead albums and on his solo albums, where Tom York has loops that are almost West African in that they're really pushing and pulling with the time, sort of swung, slightly swung, really swung. And he's got a couple things in there, and they're really subtle compared to what Tom York does. But I really like the fact that he's got this repetitive drum loop on some of the tracks, but it's kind of imperfect, like, West African drumming, where it's not completely straight divide by 2, it's not completely swung divide by 3, it's sort of messy and in the middle. I really enjoyed those.
It has the distinct quality of, it feels like music that was written by somebody who like knows music in their soul but has never actually studied music. It has that kind of vibe to me, and I don't know a lot about like his background, but it has very much a self-taught musician vibe to it, of he never learned the rules, so why obey any of them?
Yeah. I find the way he uses the drum machine interesting. Like the first two tracks tracks couldn't be more different. in that manner, because there's, the first one is, I don't know if it's X-Style or Crystal or whatever he referred to it as. And the drum machine is up front, and it's a fairly, dancey rhythm. And and when I first heard it, I thought, well, that's not really ambient to me. But then the next track, Va, he's processed the drum machine sound in a way that takes off the trebly edges on the front end, and a little bit of the bass on the bottom, so it's very midish. And he's doing things with the rhythm that, and this is why I connected with John Hassel's work, is that it did, because when I think of ambient, I don't generally think of drums or percussion and those kinds of rhythms, but the way he mixed the drums here and in the beginning of the track, it's the only thing that's playing, it did feel like ambient percussion, which, the only other person that I heard do that in that way was John Hassel, and that's why I kind of connected it to his Fourth World music.
Yeah, it's like, and I went to the word percussion too, just because of the way he's arranging it and the looseness of it. And it didn't, if somebody told me, well, actually he performed this, it wasn't really a drum machine, he just performed a couple of bars and made a loop out of it, I would have totally believed that. It's really, for lack of a better term, alive in that way, at least to me.
It feels played live. It feels like when I've listened to like people playing modular live, where you have these little imperfections. A part of the problem with doing research on this album is you have no idea with Aphex Twin what's real or what's fake. He is an all-around artist. I made these slides that I put up here very quickly. I wasn't sure where the discussion was going to go. I wish I included some of his later stuff to really prove this point. But there was a really interesting note on his Wikipedia that just says the website AllMusic described the sound quality as poor due to it being recorded onto a cassette that was later damaged by a cat.
Well, there you go. There's a genre right there for you. Lo-fi destroyed by cat.
But like, I don't get that vibe from this at all. Like, I don't know where that story came from. And I think about like some of his later albums. I think it was maybe the Richard D. James album, or maybe it was Drooks. There was one of his albums that he like the marketing on it was so strange, and like his later interviews are just so weird that you have no idea what's the truth on it. So it's very hard to like differentiate anything or state any kind of facts on anything. Anyways, one of his later albums, he leaked himself onto the dark web. So like the marketing on it was just really weird. And he has repeatedly done that. Like I said, he has done some very strange things. He, like, at times, like, only one pressing was done for an album, and he sold it on eBay for a lot of money. Like, none of it makes any sense. He is, I think, an all-around artist in the terms of I have no idea what he's doing at any point in time. He's a hard artist to understand.
Hey, one other part of his musicality I wanted to talk about is his arranging skills. So, especially given that he was so young doing some of this stuff, I thought his arranging skills were really beautiful. And then he got so much emotional depth out of a relatively finite number of tracks or loops or whatever you would call it, and that also kind of took me to, you know, West African drum ensembles where there's, you know, only 6, 7, or 8 voices. But it's kind of what you do with those, and they come, they go, and stuff like that. But I remember listening to some of the, not the first track, but some of the maybe third or fourth tracks, and thinking this would be so fun to remix if I had all the stems, you know, because he's covering so much ground emotionally, but it's not like there's new bit, new bit, new bit. It's just sort of like 6 or 7 kind of recycled things. They combine, they go away, you know. I just really liked his arranging on certain of the tracks.
He definitely has a feel that is missing from like a lot of artists. Like I said, I get the vibe from him that he never studied music as a kid and just loves making sounds, and then learned how to make those sounds appealing to other people.
Mm.
And I have a great respect for that because it does make things interesting. It makes his sound design something that you've never heard before. He's just doing what he can. I'm still going through his older albums and his newer albums from this one. I would highly suggest listening to them if you were interested in this album, just to see where he goes as an artist. But this album's hard for me to parse through because I do zone out so hard while listening to it.
I mean, from a production standpoint, I think it's done. It sounds really good. I have some. There are things where I don't care for the mix, but that's more my personal feelings than it is a qualitative decision that my mix would be better than his. And the one where I thought that the most was X-Style or Crystal. I would, if I had and I only thought of this because Miguel talked about having the stems. If I had the stems, I would push the drum machine to the back to the point where it was at the same level as the synth pads, and then bring the master fader up, as he does on the synth pads at the very last 10 seconds of the song. The drum machine drops out, and he brings the synth pad up to the front. And I would just do the whole thing like that, but have the drum machine more evenly mixed with the synth.
I do wonder about how he recorded this, and if it was just like a cassette that he was looping it over repeatedly, which I imagine is what it was, and if part of the reason why the mix is like the way it is just the order that he recorded them in.
Yeah.
Or we can just blame the cat.
Yeah.
Well, no, I thought about that too, because one of the first things, I didn't even think to go to the wiki page until today. But one of the first things I was thinking about is like, geez, what tools was he using? And if he had a sampler, well, what could samplers do back then, right? And so I got to imagine the technology is limiting what he's doing in a really cool way. But yeah, I mean, and I know we mentioned this before, but I was like immediately thinking, wow, not only how did he do this, but what was the limitation of the technology he was doing? You know what I mean? So a lot of these things are more easily appreciated or I don't know, more amazing or whatever when you know the limitations and the context within which they're creating it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I also wish that I had more information on it, because outside of that, he was just kind of making sounds using things he found and junk he found. There's very little information on it.
Mm.
It was probably a lot of circuit bending.
What's that?
Where you take like something that makes sounds and just mess with the circuitry so it makes different sounds, or so it shorts itself.
Okay.
People do a lot of really cool stuff with it, but they're so different than what's going on at the time frame that I feel like it's almost impossible to track down. And like I said, he's not a reliable narrator of his own life.
I am very curious of in terms of when Extal was made and when Thaw was made, because I think Thaw is mixed perfectly. It sounds so fantastic, and I think I can see where Extal, if it wasn't stored properly, or a cat got a hold of the cassette, I could see where that would result in that mix sounding off as it does to me. And it's interesting to have those two tracks next to each other with Extal's imperfections and Thaw's perfection.
That's actually like a really good point of this is spanning like what, 7 years?
Yeah. Are they in order, in terms of when he wrote them, or did he just randomly throw them together?
There's an entire Reddit post of people debating the order of when these albums were recorded, and
I could see that.
Extal was actually estimated at later than Thaw.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that.
With Head Phlegm being the oldest, it looks like it, or no, I being the oldest, they think. Most people consider I to be the first track that he that he recorded that's on this album.
In my notes, that's the first one that I wrote ambient under, because it really sounded like an ambient track more than the other tracks.
He stated that he was 13 when he wrote that track, or recorded that track, rather.
Wow. When I was 13, I was unsuccessfully tying my shoes most days.
When I was 13, I attempted to write an opera that I still think musically was probably more interesting than most of the stuff I wrote in college.
Well, there
So
you go.
I understand it, and I think that might be where I'm coming from when I say that it feels like somebody who never really studied music.
Yeah. I did also want to say, I was wondering, the first track really reminded me of one of my favorite Pat Metheny songs called "Above the Treetops." I think it's a Cambodian like religious song, but basically it's a loop of voices that he put music under, right? And the voices are kind of lo-fi, and but then I saw that both albums were released the same year, or the Pat Metheny album came out in '92, and I'm assuming this came out '92. I'm not sure, and that made me think. Well, first I thought maybe his work influenced Pat Metheny, but since they came out the same year, it's kind of unlikely. Then I was thinking of like what might have been bigger influences in the ether at that time in the early '90s that would lead them both to a really similar place, because they're otherwise really, really different musicians, And I wasn't listening to this kind of stuff at that point of my life. So I don't know what to say about that, just what was in the ether.
It's also important to say, well, so Aphex Twin is from Cornwall and has repeatedly stated that he was isolated from everything. That wasn't just, there was a lot of like acid music going on in the clubs at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of his influences were probably like craft work.
Mm.
I don't hear any
all I'm
crap.
thinking. I don't either, but like that's what I imagine was happening. He stated that he was also he started writing music to fight his sister, who was only listening to alternative music at the time, like alternative rock music. So it's almost like he heard that music and was like, I'm going to create the opposite.
No. I mean,
is anti-influence a thing?
Yeah, it is.
On several of these tracks, you could just drop out the drum machine and you would say, oh, he's listening to Brian Eno. You know, it's just a matter of dropping those drums out and you hear those synth pads as Eno-ish.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to assume Brian Eno was a huge influence on this. It's never stated, but
Sure.
I'm gonna go on Google Maps and see how close Cornwall is to where Eno grew up. Just because
were they playing in the same ends?
I no, they're separated by decades. But I just
Several.
think that's silly.
It's just bonkers to me that like after listening to like making this music and being like, I'm gonna play music, he played at pubs and inns. Like that is just the most insane thing to me.
Well, I could see him doing this as a DJ,
Yes, he did do a lot of DJing.
and that, yeah, I could see that working. I mean, he's in a Cornwall's pretty isolated. It's the far west, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he probably would have got a lot more gigs in London, you know, or Manchester, right? But I could see this stuff being like walking into I could imagine walking into a club and somebody's doing some crazy, cool, you know, ambient electronic DJ stuff, you know?
It's really interesting that he really only talks about his influences being like classical composers. He doesn't really list anybody in electronica or anything else. He lists like Philip Glass and John Cage and Eric Satie.
Probably Steve Reich, too.
But I see a lot of that, but not a lot.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, some of the best work comes out of people trying to be a certain thing in a completely different context, you know. And you know, it's sort of like Jaco Pastorius trying to make an electric fretless bass sound like Sarah Vaughan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes, I mean, for me at least, that makes kind of like total sense. If you love Eric Satie so much, you can't actually do Eric Satie. You have to do it in a completely different context.
I've always found it hard to place this genre and its associated genre in relation to culture, because at the time, I mean, in the early 80s, I was listening to mostly metal. By the mid 80s, you know, and Miles Davis. And then in the mid 80s, I was listening to Guns N' Roses and Miles Davis. And then, you know, in the 90s, I was in music school at the time. So I was doing all jazz at that point. So I know that electronica and electronic music and all, because that's a lot of associated genres within there. I know that was a big cultural thing in England at the time, but I have no understanding of that world, so it's very difficult for me to place where he's coming from.
There's a really interesting note, and this is more to do about his later stuff, the things that I'm more interested in. But do you know who Square Pusher is? Square Pusher is a
Porn star.
No, bassist.
Oh, okay.
An electronic musician who does like a lot of really cool things with bass and electronic music, and does a lot of like drum and bass is kind of where I like. Anyways, Aphex Twin and Square Pusher met in '95. And the stuff that I like for Aphex Twin tends to happen after '95. So how much of an influence was Square Pusher on Aphex Twin is an interesting thing that I thought about or didn't think about. Somebody else stated it, and now I'm thinking about it. And so it is really interesting that I feel like he was isolated in Cornwall, really only listening to like a very minimal amount of stuff and kind of making his own stuff on top of that kind of turned into something new, and then getting more influences as he got more involved in the music industry outside of Cornwall. and just how his music expanded after that.
Interesting. That's cool. Hey, for those of you scoring at home, I did find out that Aphex Twin and Brian Eno could not have grown up further apart and stayed in England. So Aphex Twin's on the far west, Brian Eno's on the far east. So
I just, to what Rebecca has been pointing out, I just think Eno was so omnipresent in the electronic music world at the time that he could have been an American musician and it wouldn't have mattered because of what I gather was the dominant sound in that culture at the time. Eno, if it wasn't Eno, it was stuff that was influenced by him. And of course, Kraftwerk and, all the other, and Tangerine Dream and, all those electronic pioneers.
yeah.
I'm interested in figuring out where this logo came from.
Oh, I actually have that information. Hold on, give me a second so I can pull this up. I'm working with a smaller screen than usual. So let's pull up this lovely image here that he has kept throughout his entire career. He has not changed it.
Is that his logo?
That is his logo. It was the album cover for this album, but he has maintained it as his own logo. You can find it on most of his stuff. So this
It's like a combination of an A and a T.
Yeah, I think so. So this was designed by Paul Nicholson, who was, weirdly enough, a stage dancer for several of Aphex Twin's live gigs. Which I would like to go back to. I listened to this album. I know what he was making at this time. How do you have a stage dancer for it?
Why not?
Why not?
Anyways, Nicholson has stated that he wanted it to be amorphic and soft with no sharp lines.
Oh.
Aphex Twin himself says that the design was a collaborative effort. This was a direct quote. He designed it all, but I was guiding. Like, nah, more like this. Yeah, more like that, etc. It was my idea to put the circle around it. There were quite a few iterations before I was happy. I was also astute enough to buy the rights off him with my last pounds. I was still a student, as I knew it would be very important to me, and I also didn't want any arguments down the road.
Wow.
So, unfortunately, I think Paul Nicholson doesn't get a lot of credit for this work anymore, considering it was a work-to-hire design.
So is it an A and a T, or does it have another meaning?
I imagine it's an A and a T. I do not. That is the amount of information I have. So I apologize. I have a lot of information on this, but not much like everything else with Aphex Twin. It's a mystery.
Mm.
I like it. It's one of those empty vessel kind of things. It doesn't
kind of like a Rorschach test image.
bring to it what you bring to it. It's not telling you what to think.
I think it's easy to underestimate how much the circle brings to it because it creates you start to look at the white space differently than you would if the circle wasn't there. It does a lot of stuff with the negative space that you wouldn't otherwise have. Otherwise, it would just be the logo floating in the ether, and the negative space wouldn't matter. It's just my brainy art commentary. Feel free to ignore it. Every time Beckett moves, it looks like there's some kind of puppet sitting behind her. Eyes and look at that.
Oh my gosh, I see it. It looks evil.
It's just my chair.
It looks like a monster of some kind.
So also, since you're interested in the design, Paul Nicholson also defines himself as a type designer, which probably has a lot to do with this. and has said
What's
that the has stated that it is an A,
Oh,
and he actually conceived it for a different project for Anarchist Adjustments, which was a skatewear label in San Francisco.
well, there we go.
What a great
This was one of their rejected things that was then adopted by Aphex Twin later on.
There you
and
go.
now nobody remembers Anarchist Adjustments, and everybody remembers Aphex Twin.
There's actually an entire page of him drawing different versions of this symbol that I do not have an ability to put it up on the screen at this time. But
What was that term you used to describe him at the beginning? I didn't understand that term. When you first started talking about the artist?
a type designer.
Yeah, what is that?
So designing fonts.
Oh, okay, yeah. I could see that.
It's actually really interesting. A lot of his designs were not very far off from this and kind of just feel like different proportions of the different angles. But it started for a different project.
Mm.
And eventually got led into this. And it is, yeah, Aphex Twin uses it as an A on some of his other albums.
Oh, okay. Well,
Oh, yeah, I see what you're talking about with it being drawn in different iterations.
Are you also on monotype.com?
No, I just did an image search.
Yeah. I found this on monotype.com, which it looks like is just a typeface website, a type designer website,
Sounds like it.
which makes sense as to why they would have an entire article about Paul Nicholson.
Yeah, Monotype is a publisher of fonts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's a really interesting design. It's interesting that this is just his logo for his first album because, like I said, it's continued with him. Like if you see this logo, it is Aphex Twin. It is essentially his logo. And for anybody in the industry, it is very recognizable.
There you go.
I love its
Good job.
randomness. I love its randomness. It doesn't appear to be anything, and I dig that.
But it's very identifiable.
Yes.
At the same time, and it is very amorphic, and it feels like Aphex Twin. It fits him so well. That being said, I could also see this working for a skate company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we are going to be coming up on an hour pretty quickly here. Was there anything that anybody wanted to discuss?
I covered most of what I wanted to cover.
Would you be interested in exploring more of his work in the future?
Sure.
Now the hard sell comes.
Possibly.
Reselling albums? Yes.
Well, like I said, I like
wait,
this
there's
album
more.
a lot, but it's my least favorite Aphex Twin album. So when I heard that you guys liked it, which I was a little on the fence about because I feel like choosing an kind of ambient album that's more of a vibe than anything else, like I knew Tim would be into it. But I wasn't sure how you guys were going to respond to it. Either way, I would highly suggest checking out the music video for Window Liquor. It is a trip.
Just for the title alone.
Also, you can see his face as he shows it to the world. On his 1995 album, I Care Because You Do, he released the cover artwork as a self-portrait.
Is that the one where he's making like the evil face?
No.
Oh.
It's one before it. which I feel like is the reason why he makes the evil face. The evil face is the Richard D. James album.
Okay.
He's a weird looking dude, and he leaned into it. He looks completely normal here. I considered putting some of his weirder faces up on.
Yeah, I don't think he's weird looking at all.
No.
Well, you should
But
see
then
some of the faces he makes.
I mean, the only photos that I'm seeing in this very brief search that I've been doing as we've been talking is are very normal faces, except for that one album cover.
He's a weird dude, and I would suggest looking into him a little bit more.
Noted.
Especially just as it goes as far as like multifaceted artists go. I feel like him as a persona, Aphex Twin as a persona, is an artist that like defies. He's primarily a musician, but I feel like he's an artist that kind of goes beyond that. Like the persona is the art. The way he releases music is an art. The experimentation he does is an art. The way that he just presents himself is bonkers.
So, does he? Oh, we haven't talked about. Does he do? I'm assuming he does live performances. If he started out playing in clubs as a kid, does he do that? Does he play festivals and stuff like that? It seems like he'd be a perfect guy for the right festival.
He has 2025 tour dates.
Well, there you go.
It actually lists it as he doesn't have any, but it's also saying buy tickets for the 2025 tour dates. He generally does DJing, and he doesn't play a lot of his own music.
Oh, okay.
Respect. Got to respect a guy like that.
He was born in Limerick, Ireland. It's a place. It's a style of, well, I don't know if you call it poetry, but.
You know, I brought it up in the conversation before. Somewhere down the line, we should do Dummy, because it's such a landmark, album. I mean, maybe you could argue one of the Massive Attack albums is equally landmark, but for trip hop, Dummy is just such a great album, and we could talk for days about it, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would love to dive deeper into like some English electronic music because it is very nuanced, but I feel like that's not the right word. Shoegaze, maybe?
What's the name of the band you're talking about, Tim?
Portishead.
Oh, Portishead. Their drummer was the double drummer in Radiohead when they did that double drummer tour.
Oh, interesting.
And the drummer for Robert Plant.
I think I'm going to give us a little bit of break from this vibe, but I would love to explore that in the future.
Yeah, I was just, yeah. If I hadn't come up in this conversation, it wouldn't have even occurred to me. But
no, I'm adding it to the list because that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I love that album.
All right. Does anyone have anything else to add before we end for the evening?
No, I'm good. I like this. I recommend it.
Thank you for introducing this.
I'm so glad you like it. That makes me so happy.
What, me?
Both of you.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, ask me after I've listened to the rest of it. I dislike a lot of like more abstract music, but I'll give it a shot.
You're going to be very confused.
And that's one of the things I like about the club is it makes me listen to stuff I may not typically listen to,
Yeah.
I've read tons of interviews where everybody always talking about Aphex Twin is one of my favorites, and it's like, okay, great. And then I don't go listen, so yeah.
I think I would like to explore some of his later work where he's dealing with work that he's working on currently rather than this 6 years of different recordings smashed together in an album. I would like to listen to him when he's in a certain period of his career.
Yeah, I would definitely, even his Ambient Works Volume 2 is also kind of feels like a different vibe to me. But a lot of his later stuff is it gets interesting. It gets interesting. I'm excited to hear your opinions once you go through and listen to it. I am a huge fan of Aphex Twin. I want to thank you guys for joining me and listening to it with me. And I hope to see you on the next one. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Rebecca.